the shores of old Lake Erie stands our alma mater true. Fredonia state we proudly honor, with its colors white and blue.
Welcome to today's podcast, Reflections from Fredonia. I'm Jack Croxton. I am a retired professor of psychology from SUNY Fredonia. In retirement, I thought it might be fun to interview students that went to Fredonia and have them talk a little bit about their experiences here and what they've been doing since graduation.
Hi, I'm Chloe Kowalik, and I'm a recent alum from right here in Fredonia. I just graduated in 2024, and while I was at Fredonia, I was a double major in journalism and psychology, and I had minors in English and political science. And I also thought it would be really fun to stay connected to the campus and get to know some other alums.
So we are recording from right here at the college at the Fredonia Radio Systems, Fredonia's student-run radio station. So for today's podcast, we have a very special guest. So Shawn, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself by telling us your full name and what year you graduated from Fredonia?
Thanks, Jack. Hi, everybody. My name is Shawn Buffam. I graduated from Fredonia in 1998. I have a bachelor's degree in business administration with a concentration in marketing.
Awesome. So were those the majors that you kind of came in with, or did you kind of change?
Yeah, I think initially my thought was I wanted to go into medicine, actually. So I started out taking classes geared more toward biology and the sciences, and discovered early on that those probably were not a great fit for me. I stuck with more general studies until I got to my junior year, and through some family friends and just discussions about what I really liked to do outside of school, business seemed to be the best fit for me.
So Shawn, why did you initially decide to come here to Fredonia?
You know, I reflected on that question a little bit. You had asked in advance, what the draw was to Fredonia, and for me, it was a journey. I started out at Jamestown Community College. As I said, took classes more in sciences and general studies. And when the time came to find a school to transfer to, I had applied through the SUNY application for mostly SUNY schools, primarily because I was funding my own education, and it would be important that the school I went to had both, the educational requirements I was looking for, but it also be affordable. So that was a huge consideration. Frankly, the other reason was Fredonia was just far enough away from where I grew up that I could get away from, being around people that I had gone to school with, and really have a college experience. At the time that I was here, the campus life was very active, and so that provided me that, true college experience, both academically and socially.
Well, that kind of leads into my next question. What were some of your favorite memories or experiences from your time here at Fredonia?
I had a lot of them. So my favorite experiences really probably are mostly involved with other friends and people that I met. I was active in some of the clubs, so I did participate in some of the sports, the club sports. I did students in free enterprise through the business school, and then time spent with other fellow students in residence life, and our time going out downtown to a lot of the bars and restaurants. That was always a highlight. I remember one particular weekend, I think it was for St. Patrick's Day. All the bars were doing like a scavenger hunt, and there was a list of things that you could find at the bars, and it was as a team. So we had a big group of people that were competing against other teams. I couldn't tell you in the end who actually won, but it was a really fun night. It was just fun to see the whole community kind of coming together. It was both people who lived here and students competing, and that was always, those types of events were always a highlight for me. And I would say Fred Fest was another one. I remember having I think it was the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones were here one of the years that they had it. And back then, being on campus, it was just a different experience. Which again, I just remember those weekends being sort of magical and having the whole campus, uniting together for one event. I always look forward to that.
I know. I think now there's even a bit of a push to bring FredFest back on campus
Yeah.
again.
So FredFest is not associated with the college. The college does not want to be associated with it. So I can't remember exactly why they stopped doing it. We were doing some investigative work over at the school newspaper, looking at all of our old papers, but it's no longer associated with the college, but it still happens every year. And it's mostly just, a lot of students going downtown on Canada Way Street, and mostly it's kind of more like a block party now.
Sure.
There's no music performances or anything like that because it's not on campus anymore.
Sure.
But people are keeping the spirit alive, I would say.
Hmm. So in terms of the classes, I know this is asking you to reflect from a while back, but any particular faculty or classes that you can remember?
Yeah, the faculty specifically, not so much, just because it's been so long. Honestly, I don't recall specifically. I know at the time the professor I had for marketing and the advertising classes had a huge impact on my experience, and he also was running the students in free enterprise program.
But you might be thinking of Frank Crone.
Yes, yes, it is Dr. Crone. You're
Yeah.
absolutely right. Yes, he was fantastic. He was a wonderful professor. I believe he passed
Yes,
quite a few years
he did.
ago. But no, he was fantastic. He had a big impact on me. He was also, I believe, it was either him or Dr. Tully was my advisor. But they really helped me get a balance in terms of what I would need as, foundational skills for what I had hoped to do after Fredonia. I originally wanted to work for an advertising agency. I thought that would be, kind of sexy in the advertising world. I looked at Chicago and New York City for some of the bigger agencies, and it didn't work out that way, but that would have been the path I was headed toward, and, what they had recommended as far as courses to get me there.
Right. Yeah, I think Dr. Crone even was made a distinguished professor
Okay,
for all the work that he did at Fredonia.
well deserved.
Yeah, you actually brought up a little bit about your career, and we saw your resume. Thank you for sending that over. And we saw that you've worked a variety of different positions. Right now, you're serving as the Chief Operating Officer at Orville's Home Appliances in Lancaster. And we just wanted to hear a little bit about your career and kind of what that's been like for you.
Yeah, it's been a journey. And I will say this much: I think I've been very, very fortunate in my career to have been able to work with people that were mentors to me and helped me gain experience and put me in the right position to keep taking the next step along the way. But my career began after Fredonia, and I have to go way back. So this is almost 30 years ago. But one of my first jobs, I actually worked in telemarketing, which eventually led to a sales position. That particular job was actually a connection through somebody who was a partial owner at Old Main and had a mutual friend that said, "Hey, we're hiring recent graduates, had no experience, didn't really need it." I moved to Rochester, started working there, eventually worked for a large company, Caterpillar Equipment, for a short period of time, sold some equipment for them. And through just through a network connection, met someone who worked at the Democrat and Chronicle, which is the newspaper in Rochester. And that started my career in the newspaper business. I worked in advertising sales, selling advertising space in the paper to local businesses in Rochester. I did that for a few years before my wife and I had our first daughter, and we decided to move back to Buffalo. When I got back to Buffalo, I worked at the Buffalo News, worked there for a number of years before taking another newspaper position in Cleveland for the Cleveland Plain Dealer. So all told, it was probably close to a decade I worked specifically in that business. I took a small break from the industry. We moved back to Buffalo from Cleveland and became a financial advisor. Did some stock brokering with a company locally, and then went back to the Buffalo News for another tour That was my final tour with them. They were owned by Warren Buffett, Berkshire Hathaway. So it was a great company to work for. I left there as vice president of marketing. That was really the last step before becoming publisher, and I didn't want to stay in that industry any longer.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up leaving the newspaper business and went to work for Live Nation, which was probably the coolest job I've ever had. I can't lie.
Mm-hmm.
It was amazing. My job was as a regional sponsorship director. So I had most of New York State, parts of Ohio and Pennsylvania. And for all the music venues, I put together the sponsorship deals for the brands that want to be associated with those venues and those artists. What was really cool about it is I got to be backstage with a lot of artists and bands, which is an amazing experience.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, COVID happened, and that was really that put a pause on the industry. And I stayed in the business for about another year, but it looked like that was going to be something that was going to continue for quite a while. So I had to pivot. And I had a connection through my advertising career with this local company, Orville's Home Appliances. They're family owned. They've been in business since 1965, and they're the largest independent home appliance dealer in upstate New York. So I was approached by them. They were looking for someone to be part of their succession plan, and their current CEO is retiring. He actually retires next month. So they brought me on board and said, we'd like you to learn the business and at some point take over for the person that's retiring. So that's what I've been doing for the last 4 years. And as of next month, I'll be the CEO of that company.
Awesome.
Great. But I guess what have you found to be, I guess, the joys and the challenges of being a chief operating officer?
Yeah, it's I think the joy of being in a position like that is when you have an idea or you have goals that you want to achieve for the company or individuals, being able to see that result, and when it's especially when it's a positive result, knowing that that was that was your plan that was put into action. That's of course always balanced with the um, obligation and the weight of having so many people rely on the decisions you make. So we have over 200 employees in the company. I'm responsible for 200 families, making sure that those people get paid and that we stay in business for another 50 years. So that weighs heavy at times, but then knowing that we provide a great experience for customers and our employees, that's pinnacle to what drives me to do what I do every day.
How do you feel your time at Fredonia helped to prepare you for your career?
I think the lessons that I learned that were most important to me and that I would share with any student, I guess that's currently here is you really have to be in the moment. Really recognize the experiences as they're happening and try to take full advantage of them. So, as I said, a lot of my career has been based on connections I've made or networks I formed with various people, and that's still true today. And in my personal life, I mean, I met my wife at Fredonia. We got married and have two beautiful daughters, one of which is attending Fredonia now in the education department. My nephew went to school here. One of my best friends that I still have, to this day is a former roommate from Fredonia. So I think the taking the opportunity that you have while you're here to make connections, to experience as much of it as you can, it goes so fast. It's hard to believe, in 4 years you're done and you're out in the real world, and I reflect all the time about what a positive experience I had, not just at the campus, but just in the community. And I would encourage everybody to take full advantage of that. If you're not out there meeting people and trying new clubs and getting involved, then you're really not making the most of your experience.
Good advice.
Absolutely. We actually also saw on your resume that you're currently serving on the SUNY Fredonia Alumni Association Board of Directors. So, what really made you want to stay involved with the college, and how has that experience been for you so far?
Well, to be perfectly candid, my main reason was that obviously with my daughter attending here now as a current student, I wanted to make sure that I could be involved at some level. As I mentioned, my nephew also is a graduate, and one of his family members is also on the board and had reached out and said, we think with your experience, it might be a good fit. And how it is a good fit for me is that I'm able to provide ideas and input through the Alumni Association as a way to give back, right? You do these things as a way to volunteer, to give back to the community. So for me, what I hope is that the alumni that I know and other alumni have a positive reflection as they think about Fredonia, that they'll consider it for their own children or other family members, that this is a school that can provide a lot for your education and for your career. And I think that's the job of the alumni, is to be an ambassador and an advocate for this school. And, if you're in business and you want to have students come in and intern for you, again, that's part of that obligation. So that's how I can give back to the school. And that's why, in addition to having my daughter here and paying her tuition, that's my way of being able to give back.
Absolutely.
I think we've already sort of hit on the question, what advice would you offer to students? Is there anything else you can think of that you might like to add before we wrap up this interview?
Yeah, I have one piece of advice, and it's something that I like to give advice through stories, which, I'm sure my children are sick of hearing them. But I'll share this, that, in business, a lot of times you are negotiating, right? And negotiating is about having two different parties coming together to figure out a way that they can mutually agree upon, some value or something. So at a very young age, I was working in Ellicottville during Fall Fest. I was basically just doing a bunch of odd jobs and making money for a bar owner. And one of the jobs he gave me for that weekend was to sell, basically from a grill, sell, sausage and hot dogs and Clams Casino. And I remember I spent the whole day doing this. It was probably 12, I probably violated some, child labor law at the time, but he had me out there just, whatever I could make of it, just sell it what you can. And, at the end of the day, I had sold everything that was available, made quite a bit of income. I probably a couple $1,000s throughout the course of the day. And we met, and I remember thinking to myself, wow, I'm going to make a pretty big payday. And I didn't really know what to expect, but he called me in his office and he said, "So, looks like you had a pretty successful day. Thank you. I hope you had a good experience." I said, "Yeah, it was great. I got to spend time meeting people and talking to them." And he said, "So what do you think you should be paid for today?" And for whatever reason, I kind of panicked and I thought, well, I know what minimum wage is, and it was probably $5 an hour or something at that point. And I kind of did this quick math in my head, and I thought, well, I think like $75 is probably what he's expecting to pay me if I'm thinking in terms of minimum wage. So I throw this number out. I think it's like $75. And he goes, "You know what? That sounds really fair. Here you go. Thank you very much." And I thought, wow, I just got, kind of screwed on all this money I gave him. And he stopped me and he said, "So why did you give me that number?" And I said, "Well, I thought it was the number that you would think is fair." And he goes, "Well, what do you think you should have been paid?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. I made a lot of money today, maybe half or 25% of it." He said, "Well, then why didn't you ask for that?" He said, "I'm going to give you something that's more valuable than the balance of that money." He said, "It's advice. In the future, if someone asks you, what do you think you deserve? You need to really contemplate what you're worth and always ask for what you're worth and never compromise on that." And that has been something that I've taken with me my whole life. I really believe that your time and your own personal worth is the most valuable thing you have. And for that reason, never compromise on it. Always ask for what you deserve and make sure that you get paid what you're worth.
Good story.
Thank you.
Although probably at the time you sort of wish he would have given you the 20%
I
plus
mean,
the advice.
I absolutely would have taken both.
All right. Well, we've enjoyed talking to you today, and the advice that you've offered I think, has been very worthwhile. And congratulations on a very successful career.
Thank you. And thank you both for having me. This has been fun. It's just nice to be back on campus and be involved in any way. So thank you, Chloe, and thank you, Jack.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much for appearing on our podcast today. And this is Jack Croxton signing off.
I'm Chloe Kowalik, and we'll see you in the next podcast. Thank you.
Sing its glory its praises. Let them ring forever true. Beloved is our alma mater, Fredonia State.